Hi, I'm happy to host here at the virtual Haifa Film Festival the amazing director, J'ry Rot'well. J'ry Rot'well is a documentary filmmaker who directed many documentaries and won many prizes. His work includes the award-winning feature Donor Unknown, Town of Runners, Deepwater, How to Change the World, The School in the Cloud, Sour Grapes, and more. Hi, J'ry.
Hi.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on this wonderful film. I really enjoyed watching it. It's amazing. It's exciting, deep, very aesthetic, and very cinematic. And I would love to hear from you about the process of making the film. How did you get to this idea of the film? Did it come from reading the book, or do you have any personal connections to this subject?
I mean, the idea really came from the producers, two of the producers, Jeremy and Stevie, who you see in the film, his son Joss you see in the film, and they'd read Nauki's book and were so changed in the way they related to Joss, I think, by the book, that they were interested in making it into a film. I've done quite a lot of work around sort of what used to be called learning disability and autism. So I kind of was, I felt like I had a handle on that subject matter. I've got some personal experience and within our family of autism. But I guess the book really sort of said a lot of things that changed my understanding, really made me understand the sort of sensory aspects of autism and the way in which what we often see as autistic behavior is a response to a sensory perception of the world. And so I suppose my first thought was I would make a film about Nauki, about how he wrote the book, about him finding his voice. And I went to see Nauki, and he was interested in the film being made, but he had kind of one condition, which was that he wouldn't be in it. He didn't want to be in the film. So that was kind of, that felt like quite a challenge, because the book is basically a set of questions and answers. It's answers to 58 questions that people ask him about autism. So it's like trying to make a film out of a how-to manual or something. But I think in the end that it was very helpful, because it sort of freed me up to use the Nauki's words to kind of explore different people's experience around the world, and to take us on a sort of journey which was the same subject matter as the book, but not the book and not Nauki. So it uses the book as its starting point, but it hopefully takes it into cinema instead of into a book.
Yeah, so that was really my next question about, usually we see books made into dramatic feature films, and I think it's very unique making a documentary out of a book. So I was wondering, so now I know you were going to make the film about Nauki, but he wasn't interested. And so kind of the translators became very, I think, very centered in the film. So I was wondering why was the translators became so.
Well, I think so. I came across the book in the David Mitchell's translation. David Mitchell he's a well-known novelist who wrote Cloud Atlas and has written the latest Matrix film, I think. And he and his partner Kay have an autistic son, and I think they had the same experience with the book as Stevie and Jeremy did. It was they'd read it in the original Japanese and wanted to initially to make it available to people who worked with their son, so they started translating it. For me, the book has a kind of shape to it. So in translating the book to film, I I wanted to keep this shape of where the book begins with Naoki saying, you know, I sometimes wonder why I've been born as a human being at all. And it ends really with him both kind of celebrating his autism and who he is, and saying, you know, if someone could change my autism, I wouldn't necessarily change it. You know, it's part of me. And I felt that that sort of shape was a shape that the film should have. And also that we should use the book to like the people we encounter in the film shouldn't be used just as examples of things that are in the book, but should have their own kind of identity and their own difference. So that sort of meant thinking about, did we need to find another way of conveying the spirit of the book, which is why we came upon this idea of a young Japanese boy kind of in a landscape, and we were very lucky to find Jim Fujiwara, who's a young non-speaking autistic boy, who worked with us on those scenes that run through the film, and that's mostly where it feels like that's where the book belongs.
Yeah, I was wondering who's that Japanese boy that's photographed, and I was wondering, is he an actor? Is he really?
Well, people read him in different ways. I mean, one of the things I think I learned about filmmaking in making this film is how little you need to tell people, and how useful it is not to tell people things some of the time. You know, like there's productive confusion in a film, and then there's kind of useful confusion when it makes an audience active to interpret something in their own way, or to think their way through something that they don't understand. So I think for some audiences, the boy is David Mitchell, the translator's son. For some, he is the young Naoki. For others, he is like a kind of spirit, you know, and I think in a way he's all three of those things. So yeah, it was a real learning experience for me to make a film that wasn't so driven by story and was driven by a kind of energy more than by a story.
Yeah. Why is the voiceover in English and not in Japanese?
In Japanese. Yeah, interesting question. I mean, that's partly. I mean, we did actually do. There is we toyed with that as an issue, as an idea at one point, and you know, I think it would have been you know, as interesting a film. It would have been different. I suppose I always worry about audiences having to read a lot, you know, and but then, you know, of course, it would have been better for a Japanese audience. But so I think, you know, in the end, we went with English because we felt that the film would be subtitled less, and that would make it a bit more accessible, so that you were hearing the film and not reading it, you know.
That's true. So I was curious to know, how did you get to these characters, the autistic children around the world? Was this, did you know it in advance you're going to look for children all around the world, or how did this happen? Because it's really amazing.
I suppose, I mean, I had been filming on another project in Sierra Leone in West Africa. And so I was very kind of conscious that often the films about autism are very much from a Western perspective and a Western kind of middle-class experience. And I wanted to broaden it out because autism is everywhere and is universal. You know, it's a universal part of humanity. And then in terms of finding other people, I knew there was this shape to the film, and that it should start in a way with trying to make an audience see differently, see in a different way. And therefore that finding Amrit, whose visual art does that, was a great way of getting into the visual, the idea of looking at detail and not at the big picture. And then I sort of always knew that Joss, who I got to know very well, should be in the film. And in a way, Joss was going through his sort of adolescence at that time, where that sensory world was very overwhelming for him. And I think, so it felt that you should go from establishing this different way of seeing to looking at how sometimes that could be overwhelming, and then coming out of that into someone who was maybe a bit older and a bit more political about how they saw their autism, which was where I found Ben and Emma. I was looking for somebody who was an advocate, was an activist. And then finally to Sierra Leone, where it feels to me it's about the society, not just about the person or the family. It's about the wider society's response to autism.
Yeah, they're all really amazing characters. I was wondering about the ethical questions that arise when you're filming disabled children or disabled people. How did you deal with these questions? Did the parents worry about the exposure of their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult. And I think, I mean, legally, of course, the parents can give consent for most of the children, but ethically, it's a different question. You know, I feel you can sort of take two lines on this. So I'd say with at least two of the characters, or three of the characters, with Ben and Emma and Amrit, you know, I could talk them through what we were doing. I could show them the footage. We could talk about the film in some way, and I felt kind of a very strong kind of consent from them. With Joss and Justina, it's more difficult, but it's a process of, again, just feeling the sort of feel of it, showing them the things that we're filming, trying to be very gentle about the way that we're shooting. But I felt in the end you're in a choice where, do people who are deemed not to be able to give consent, do they never get represented because of that? You know, is there a way of representing people who are unable themselves, maybe, or seen as unable to give their consent? And how do you feel for that, for it to be ethically okay? So that I think was the journey we were on there. And I still don't know what the right answer is. You know, I think it's wrong, for example, for parents to share their children's meltdowns on Facebook. That feels a breach of people's confidence. But at the same time, I sort of also feel that people's lives need to be represented, and it's a difficult line.
And were the behaviors, shots or scenes you didn't show because you were afraid it could offend them?
Yeah, there were definitely.
Editing room, you have to protect them.
Yeah, I think there were definitely things. Yeah, I think there were definitely things that we didn't include because it felt a sort of infringement of privacy. So I suppose the most borderline scene is which was actually filmed on a phone by Joss's parents when they filmed it for other reasons, when Joss is sort of getting very angry and overwhelmed by something. You know, and the question was, where do you kind of cut that scene? How do you cut it in a way that that tries to mitigate the intrusion of it? So for me, that was about, how do you use the words of the book to kind of flip the perspective around, so you're more in Joss's perspective, you're not objectifying him, and how we cut that scene right back, you know, until there was like only a few frames really. But yeah, those kinds of considerations.
Yeah. So the film is very, very cinematic, the shooting, the editing, the sound editing, and it's really amazing. And it gives a sense of what goes through the minds of an autistic person. At what stage of the work did you decide to film these visual scenes? How did you think about what to shoot?
I suppose with both sort of sound and picture, we felt that the images and the sounds should primarily come from the real world, from people's real environments. You know, that we weren't trying to imagistically interpret a subjective experience. We were trying to look at a room and think about, you know, what are the things in this room that you don't normally notice that might be something that this person notices and lives with. So for example, in Amrit's room, there are all these fans that are turning, And when you really started to look at those fans, they had this kind of rhythm that kind of Amrit often sort of rocked to or loved to be near the fans. So it felt like then, we film with Amrit, but then we spend, a few hours filming fans in the room in different ways and also recording in 360-degree sound. So we decided to make the film with an Atmos mix, which is where you can place the sound anywhere in the cinema. And our sound recorders, every location, we recorded 360-degree sound and then kind of built it on the sounds of that location. So it's kind of, we tried to work in quite an organic way where we would film observationally with people, but then we would look at the spaces that we were in with those people and think about how might we also portray that space in a subjective way that links to the book.
Yeah, so that works really amazing. I hope people at home can feel the sound like it is in a cinema.
Yeah, I mean, we made a binaural mix. So I think probably the version that's at Haifa is, if you listen on headphones, it's binaural, which sort of makes a slight imitation of the 360, but it's not quite the same, really. It's been a real shame to release the film at the same time as COVID, because basically we spent all this time, designing it for a cinema, and basically nobody can see it in a cinema.
So what happened with the film after you finished it?
So
everything has a journey.
Yeah, so we finished it in January and it went to Sundance, and we had a great festival at Sundance. It won the Audience Award for documentary, which was great. And then we were at our second festival. We had loads of festivals booked. We were at our second festival in Prague, and I think COVID shut the festival down in the middle. And then since then, really, it's been all online screenings until last week when I did a couple of screenings in Athens Film Festival, which were physical screenings, which was great. So we're sort of waiting, really. In our distribution, we decided to go down a cinema release route because we felt the film was kind of, intended for a cinema experience. And so we have a release. Yeah, we're waiting. We had a release in the States in January, we hope. Unfortunately, the chain that's releasing in the UK has just announced this morning that it's closing all its cinemas. So I don't really know where the film is at.
And what kind of response do you get from audience that watch this film?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for me, making the film was unlike other films that I've made. It felt very kind of instinctive, like you were kind of, because there's no story, you were sort of following a very instinctive route. And in editing as well, it's like any image could come after any other image. There was no particular logic other than this shape, And so when we finished it, I hadn't really got a sense of whether it would work or mean anything to anybody else. So that was kind of nice that it does seem to have an impact, and especially amongst families of people, of autistic people, and amongst educationists and amongst autistic people themselves. Yeah.
What did Naoki and the other characters of the film think about it?
So I sent the film to Naoki. We did a Japanese translation for him, and he sent me a very lovely email back saying thanks, and that was great. So I think he really liked it. There wasn't anything he wanted to change. And then again, we've shown it obviously to the other contributors. Ben and Emma have taken part in quite a few of the online Q&As, which has been lovely.
Wow.
And I feel like if the film can make them more seen and heard and make their voices, amplify their voices, that's an important role it can play.
Yeah. Is there any message you would like to the viewers to convey from your film? I feel the film gives you a very unique watching these people and understanding something we usually don't get to hear them and understand. But is there any message you feel that you want the film to?
I think, I mean, my experience of making the film and of encountering all of this writing, not just by Nauki, but by other non-speaking autistic people, was to really think about how you perceive the world yourself, and how, you know, we all perceive the world in subtly different ways, with different associations, different sensory priorities. And so much of our communication happens without us thinking about that. And I just think it's a really useful thing to think about how different our sensory perception of the world is, and how actually maybe that enables us to be a lot more kind of human in the way we treat each other.
Do you see a connection between your previous films and this film?
I don't know, it's hard. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, it's similar to a film I made called, I mean, it's not similar, but a film I made called Heavy Load was about a band, a punk band, some of whom were autistic. And again, I think that was also about, you know, a group of people who saw the world in a really different way. But yeah, for me, it was a bit of a departure, and it's something that I hope that the next film I make will build on the things that I learned. You know, every film you learn new things about filmmaking, and so, you know, you just hope that you can use the things you learned in the next film. But the problem is the next film is always completely different anyway. So,
yeah. So what is your next project?
Well, at the moment I've come across 230 hours of tape recordings from a house in London in the 1970s that was haunted by a poltergeist. So it's a film that's based on an experience of a poltergeist haunting, or it's a series actually we're making. So it's another project in which sound is really important, I think. Things not all the time.
Wow, well, that's interesting. You've been, I think you've been before to Israel to Haifa film.
No, I don't think I've
Your film.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I think maybe How to Change the World was in Haifa. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
So you haven't been. So sorry you couldn't come this time. Maybe next film you get to come to.
So yeah.
Haifa. Okay, there's any other thing you think it's important for the Israeli audience to know before or after watching your film?
No, I mean, I'd love to hear what people think about the film. There's a Facebook group, The Reason I Jumped, the Facebook group. So do join that. There's a whole, especially, you know, those autistic people or families of autistic people, there's a lot of people on there sharing conversations about the film and about their own experiences. So do join in that.
Great. So that's a very nice point to finish our interview, and I hope people watch the film because it's really amazing. The subject and the cinema both are really very special, very unique, very amazing, and I hope we see you next time.
Yeah, okay. See you. There we go. Thank you.